Hello, my name is Robert King, and this semester in software engineering process and tools, I was involved with the dev and coding team. So the structure of my presentation will be I'll first talk about the concept of the product that our team developed over the course of the semester. I'll introduce all my team members, including myself, and then finally, I will go through all the process and tools that we use throughout the semester and what I learned about the software engineering development process. So to begin with, I'll talk about the actual application concept and why we made the certain design choices we did at the beginning. Uh, the application that we chose to develop was an Android mobile application. Uh, we chose we decided on the Android development platform because, for one, the only language that we all knew in common was Java, and we thought using the Android development platform was probably the most suitable in terms of developing an appealing, complete, streamlined product rather than a Java application on a desktop environment, which is limited in its practicality and overall usefulness. Uh, the actual application that we decided on was a relatively simple productivity application. We called it Timekeeper, and so basically it's just an application which you use to keep track of certain tasks, and you want to monitor and log all your activity in certain areas and generate analytics of what you've done in certain areas, and more or less, yeah, just keep track of certain activities that you want to monitor in your life. Um, okay, so now I will introduce myself and all the teammates and the sort of role that we ended up having in this project. Myself, Robert King, I was a member of the backend team. So I was mainly involved in just contributing to the general overall design of the backend. So what our classes would be for our program. So this would involve like how we structure keeping track of activities. So you create a log for a certain activity, and then you create a bunch of intervals for each log to add certain uh, intervals of time spent on an activity, and from there you would use all that data to generate the analytics and develop an idea of how much time you're spending on certain activities. Um, so being involved in the back end, I was involved, in just testing and developing the back end with my other team members. Uh, I'd like to introduce now Tyson Eady. He was also another member of the back end team. He ended up being very important in just the overall implementation. He had a lot of experience in database programming, which was very important to this application. So he wrote the majority of skeleton code for the database and implemented just the basic classes. So what he did was very important for our product, and yeah, his design was more or less fully functional by the end of the semester, or it was at least very clear and well thought out. Uh, Next, I'd like to introduce Shannon Coldwell. He was a very influential team member. He was the oldest team member in our group, and he was very enthusiastic, and he was very influential in the early weeks in deciding. He was probably the catalyst behind the actual application concept. So it was him who basically just came up with the general idea of a simple application, and we all agreed that it was a relatively doable task and it was a decent product that we could develop within the course of the semester. And beside from being the person who came up with the general concept, he was also a member of the front end team, and yeah, he was very helpful in just the implementation of the code and the interface mockups which were designed early in the semester. I'd also like to introduce Akash Bansali. He was another member of the front end team. Perhaps he didn't contribute as much in terms of uh, the concept or idea of our product, but he was extremely important in the actual implementation of the product. He wrote the majority of the user interface code, so he learned how to write all the XML files and develop an Android interface and test it properly. So he learned a lot over the course of the semester in writing and developing Android applications. The second last team member is Sarah Juong. She was another member of the front end team. So early in the semester, she was just important in determining how the flow layout of the program would be, the screens we would have, how the interface would look, and how we would flow, how a user would flow between tasks. So, and beside from the front end duties that she performed, she was also very important in choosing our version control system for all our code which we wrote, which was a very important task that we only sort of got together late in the semester. And she was a person who got a lot of the initial steps happening, which ultimately was very significant for our final product. And finally, there was also James Reed, who was another member of the front end or the back end team with me and Tyson. Yeah, he contributed a lot of ideas to the basic design and implementation of our system, questioned the structure that we had originally intended on, and helped clear up a lot of ideas. So he was very important in that regard. Okay. Now I'll talk about first the processes we used in this semester and what I've learned about the software engineering development cycle. So first of all, our team, we decided on a Scrum application development framework. So that we would, that's part of the reason we chose to develop in the individual teams of the front end and the back end. And we chose not to plan everything rigidly out before we started working. We started working early with just the general idea, and we iteratively developed and revised as we went along. I suppose ultimately this process, it was a very good experience for me in this subject because I learned how different it is developing in a team rather than just developing individually on, say, a programming assignment. It's very difficult to communicate your ideas and for everyone to be on the same page. So the way we developed in this semester using the Scrum framework, I found, there were perhaps a lot of weaknesses, and there were times where we weren't really sure of what we were doing. We were trying to do too many things at the same time, and there was a bit of confusion. So despite the fact that we were effective and developed a fairly decent product by the end of the semester, I found that our development framework there were some holes in it and some things which, I could see how a lot of problems could arise in the workplace developing in a team using this framework. Another process we used in our team was code review meetings. So this was very important. It mainly took place within the later weeks of the semester when we'd actually written a fair chunk of code that we could look at and critique. So Tyson wrote a lot of the database code in my case, and that was certainly what I had to look at and review and question what he was doing. So I had to look at his basic database design, and we had to see how he was implementing the Android APIs and integrating his code with Akasha's. So the code review meetings they could be very tedious, and they could get quite frustrating because there was a lot of work involved, but I learned how significant they were to the team development process. Another one of the main processes we used over the course of the semester was just the weekly group meetings. They were extremely important. There were the 2 group meetings every Wednesday afternoon after the lecture where we did a lot of work, but we also met in private quite a bit. Every Wednesday morning for an hour or 2 we would maybe meet, or sometimes just after other lectures for other classes we would meet and discuss our ideas. This was another place where Shannon was very vocal and effective. He he would draw diagrams for us, and we would we would actually get a very clear idea of what our product would be, how the flow would work, and we also did a lot of independent research on what we were developing, because even though we all had the Java background, to develop an Android application, there was a lot of new things we needed to learn, and involved a lot of independent research, and certain members of the team, being given the responsibility of learning the new skills involved for our product to be developed properly. Uh, we also Another process we used in this semester was just coding style conventions, which is quite a simple one. So because so many people were writing code on the same project, we sort of had to figure out that what we wrote should be quite uniform in style. So this involved just like camel case naming for variables and methods names, commenting code in certain ways, not coming up with arbitrary variables which don't make a whole lot of sense. So this was just something we learned to be very conscious and aware of when we're working with other people and we want to keep everyone pleased. Uh, and the final process that we had to learn was code integration, which was fairly difficult for us because it was hard for us to learn all the advanced tools of software, like team development tools. So this involved, version control and what have you. We only really got a decent idea of how to do it by the end of the semester. And for the most part, we were actually just developing all our code independently. And at the end, we finally merged the back end and front end code together and had a decent product going. Okay, now I would like to go over the tools we used in this course. Early in the semester, Lucidchart was a very important tool for us. We used it to design interface mockups. So this was just basic. What would the word be? Just a mock-up or a replica of what the screen would look like. So the interface components, the button, the home button, the log items, so like drop-down list, what have you. So there was probably maybe 3 or 4 screens in our product, and we determined how they would flow with each other depending on user input. So Lucidchart was very important in that regard. And we also used it for class diagrams, so how we would have log items, tags for every log, and intervals for every log as well, for every log of little intervals. So the class diagram was very important for us to just wrap our heads around what we were going to do with our overall back-end design. Perhaps the most important tool we used this semester was the Eclipse Integrated Development Environment, equipped with the Android Development Toolkit. Since we'd all used Java in Programming 1 and 2, what have you, we knew how to use Eclipse properly, but in this semester we also had to learn how to use the Android Development Toolkit on top of it, which has a lot of unique features which needed to be learned. And Android has a lot of their own unique APIs which we were completely unfamiliar with and weren't necessarily intuitive if you just had the Java background. So also with Eclipse we had to use Eclipse to, say, refactor our code, and also through Eclipse integrate our version control system with our code. And getting to version control, another one of the main tools we used was GitHub, which is a source control system where a team of developers store all their code on a central repository, and they update and commit changes to their code to the repository, and these changes get pushed back to all the developers' local machines, and from there you can develop, go backwards, and just go through your overall code and design. Another tool we used was just Google Docs for basic requirements and documentation sharing. this was a very important tool early in the semester, and yeah, it was very useful. And another one of the tools less mentioned was just we did our group created a Facebook page, a Facebook group for private for all members, and we used that was also very helpful for us just to clear up general ideas and blogs, uh, just group meetings. It was all a lot of that. A lot of the core group communication actually took place on the Facebook page. So yeah, that was also another very important tool for us this semester. So thank you for listening to my talk, and that's all. Thank you.